Welcome, everyone. I'm Quinn Fitzgerald. I'm the CEO of the World Open Water Swimming Association, and we promote open water swimming worldwide in all of its forms, from racing 1 to 10K to marathon swimming, age group, masters, and even the crazy sport of ice swimming. And we are thrilled today to focus on coaches. Coaching is a big part of what we do. We view it as the ambassadors to the sport, the people who are sharing the joy of open water swimming for the next generation, doing it safely, and we want to share best practices. We have an online course you guys are working your way through. But if you're like me, the best way to learn is alongside your peers with someone who's been there and done that, which is why we're thrilled to have scored Catherine Case to lead this session and the next 3 sessions after this. And I'm going to let Catherine tell her personal story, but one anecdote that I think a lot of people don't realize, we are a global organization, but we're based in the United States. And the United States is behind in a lot of ways in open water swimming, but in one very specific, tangible way, which is the medal count in the Olympic Games. And there have been 24 medal opportunities over the last 4 quadrennial Olympics. Catherine, how many medals have we won?
1.
So Catherine coached Haley Anderson to a silver medal in 2012, and it is a big deal that she's here to share a little bit about that journey, not specifically at the Olympic level, but everything she's learned about open water swimming over the years. And before I kick it over to Catherine, there's just a couple incredibly noteworthy people in the Zoom. Because we're such a large group, I decided we aren't going to do introductions, but over the next 4 weeks, hopefully we'll have some time to get to know each other a little bit better. But 2 people in particular, Shelly Taylor-Smith, can you just say hi and tell us why you're here? So Shelly's muted. So while she unmutes herself, I will tell her she has the most storied marathon swimming career of maybe any, not only female, but male and female. And in fact, she is notorious for almost always beating the men. And so Shelly, do you want to say hi, or are you being shy? Okay, we'll come back to Shelly. The other person who is a current world record holder in the session is marathon swimmer Sarah Thomas, who is the only woman, well, she's most famous for her 4-way crossing of the English Channel, although she has other world records, and I encourage you to look her up. And in fact, we'll include some information in the show notes, because these are your peers over the next 4 weeks, and it's amazing to see incredible people joining. So Catherine, take it away.
Sure. Can you hear me? I hope.
Yep, your volume is perfect.
Perfect. Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I have not done anything like this. Technology is not my forte, so I want to thank Quinn and all of his people for helping me a little bit. I'm excited to be able to, I guess, share my journey through open water. As Quinn mentioned, I did coach Haley Anderson to a silver medal in 2012. And at the same Olympic Games, I was actually credentialed with Tunisia and coaching Os Malouli, who won gold in the 10K. And he also won bronze that same games. And so that was a pretty big year. Prior to that, my start actually coaching in open water was in 2005. So I feel like I've learned so much over the years. I think as a coach, we're all still learning and still asking questions, and, for athletes as well. I don't believe there's one way to do, to coach an athlete. I think all athletes are different. I think later on in these classes, I'll be able to talk more about kind of coaching philosophy and specifically working for athletes. So I'm going to try to stay and complement what the online program is that that you all are currently, reading and learning about online. So today I'll probably talk about planning for open water training swims, planning for open water races. And, I am not an open water swimmer. I never swam an open water race in my life. So I'm only, happy to share my story, kind of my perspective, what I have learned over all these years, and, and hopefully supplement everything else. So with that, we can go to the next slide. Okay, maybe the next one. So a little bit just about who I am, to kind of help you all understand my background. As I mentioned, I never swam open water. I was a distance swimmer at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I maybe did a couple triathlons, but that was just for fun. I also was the first one out of the water, and the first triathlon I did, and got on my bike, and I actually went the wrong direction because I didn't even know what I was doing. So I think that might have been one of my last ones. But anyway, I got right into coaching. I have coached at the club level. So I coached at different clubs in Mississippi, Virginia, North Carolina, and I'm currently living in Boise, Idaho, and coaching a small team here. My daughter, she's 12, and she's on the team. I think coaching club was really important for me because I do believe it helped me understand the development of different athletes at different ages.
Hey, Catherine, sorry, I'm going to interrupt. I just put in the chat, guys. If you have questions, please type them in the chat. And if everyone can please mute their screen. We are recording this for the people who could not join us today. So we want to have clean audio if we can. So if everyone can just take a minute and find the little red mute button, that would be awesome. We're good.
Okay. But, I think club coaching really was helpful in my development and just understanding how club teams operate, understanding that maybe a 15-year-old athlete is going to be different than, an 18-year-old that's getting ready to go off to college. I also, a majority of my career was spent coaching in college. So I was able to coach at UNC for 3 years, and then spent the last 12 years coaching at the University of Southern California. And so, fortunately for me, I was able to work with highly motivated athletes that are in college. But really my job was coaching college. My hobby and my passion was always open water. In the United States, you get opportunities to do training camps or to be a national team coach by putting an athlete on the national team. And so every year that national team would reset, and, it would always be a challenge of mine. Can I help an athlete, first of all, be interested in open water? And second of all, how can I help them, get on the national team and being able to travel and race? So I really feel fortunate that I've had some different experiences coaching club, college, and, being able to be a national team coach where you're expected to lead Team USA at a world championship level and mentor other coaches and come up with training plans that are going to work with some different types of athletes, and come home with an overall goal of helping those athletes reach their dreams and hopefully win some medals along the way. I am really fortunate to have a great family, and I'm really lucky that my parents were able to help me take care of my daughter when she was, the first 10 years of her life. When you travel, luckily for me, being able to go to, Tokyo last summer, we were gone for 42, 44 days. And that's a really long time to be on the road. And just being able to have my parents help, my husband to be able to be supportive and understand sort of what was driving me. And then, raising a daughter that I think is important. In a lot of times you walk on a pool deck and you see a lot of male coaches, and I always wanted to make sure that I was doing the best job that I could I'm trying to raise her to understand that, anyone can be a head coach of the Olympic Games. Anyone can help athletes reach their goals and their highs and their lows, and so many life lessons along the way. So I think having to balance all of that definitely has been challenging, but I've been fortunate to have a support staff, and that is my family. And then, there are so many coaches like Quinn. I love what you said in the beginning about mentorship and being able to talk to other coaches, because I really feel like that is how I learned so much over the years, is by asking coaches, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? I'm constantly observing when I'm at an open water event. I'm watching how a coach interacts with an athlete at a pool deck, in the pool training. What are habits that are important outside of the pool that I can continue to challenge people along the way. And so I've been fortunate to have a great group of coaches and people that inspired me and taught me early on. So my first world championship event was in 2005, and in Montreal. I think Shelly was there, but Steve Munatonis was there, Sid Cassidy, Denny Ryther, and Rick Walker, and their passion for the sport really inspired me and helped me understand that I could ask questions. How do I become the best leader that I can? Who can I call when I have a question? So I think I mentioned I have a lot of different pictures in here. Really, they all kind of show the joy that I've had with working with great athletes. As I mentioned, I never swam open water. I am, honored that there are people here that have done amazing things, and I certainly can't speak to everything. So, I mainly focus my experience on a world championship selection of events, and that being the 5K, a 10K, a 25K, and a team relay. But why open water? I'm hoping everybody's here because we all have the same passion. We love the sport. I mentioned I got hooked in 2005 because I was lucky to coach a great athlete, a 15-year-old kid named Chip Peterson, and he was really successful, but we learned together. And the sport, from my eyes, I saw strategy, and I saw no two competitions were exactly the same, and it was unpredictable. And I loved having a conversation with athletes and saying, this is when you need to execute. How are we going to prepare? Expect the unexpected. And really along those lines is, as a coach, you have to prepare your athlete to make decisions. And I love that accountability. And I love I found the sport really dynamic and exciting. It's a lifelong sport. I mean, we can all set goals. We can go out and find a race, a triathlon. We can set world records and swim from islands to island. I think that it's something that the open water community is really unique. And I really value that. I like the idea that there's not a time when you are showing up at a race representing the United States, whether it be a 5K or a 10K, as I'll talk to today. The time is irrelevant, and so I really enjoy the psychology of working with athletes and figuring out, not only are you going for a time, because the currents are going to be different, the temperatures are going to be different, your competition is always going to be different. So really, you kind of get to set this individual goal and in Haley's case, a lot of times it was like, I need to be the top American, or I need to be the best today. And a lot of things along the way don't go your way. And watching an athlete figure those things out and being able to help them is always really fun for me. Open water, you get to travel and see the most amazing places. If I can think that there have been like beaches in Ecuador, and I've traveled to Australia, I think 6 different continents for competitions. And, as part of the open water team, we used to be so proud that we got to see other countries, and just other experiences were so different compared to the pool team, because the pool team is, they're on a bus and they're at a really nice hotel, and then they're pool, and then they're back. And, we're getting a chance to really meet with local people and see the beauty of a lot of different places. And so I always try to recruit athletes to do open water for that reason. As I said, open water it's fun. This is a really challenging sport. There are so many things that are unpredictable, but I think that is true in life. And continuing to push ourselves out of our comfort zone is another great life lesson that I found. And above all, we want to make sure that safety is paramount. For those of you that do kind of follow the 10K of sports, when Fran Crippen died in 2010, it was a really hard time for us in the US. And we did hire somebody at USA Swimming to be a safety, not even sure what his title was then, but just making sure that when we send athletes anywhere, we're making sure that we're putting them in the safest waters. And I think that's something that maybe we can get more people involved in open water and hosting races, because there is this element of fear of the unknown. I think a lot of times people don't really know how to put on a safe race or go out for a safe training session. So I'll probably cover some of that today, some of the things that I've learned, and how I try to prepare. So Lauren, can we do the next slide? So as I mentioned, I kind of, again, just want to share what I've learned over these years. And I can tell you, when I started working with open water swimmers, mainly pool swimmers, and having them transition into open water, there are a lot of aspects that go into it. I would have coaches come join me down at the beach in Southern California, and just like the flip-flops and a bathing suit. And, I don't think they realize that you do kind of have to put some thought into what you're doing before you get your athletes in the water. And the picture on the bottom left right there, I'm just realizing that is a picture from the Pan Am Games in 2007. That was Callan Keller, Chloe Sutton, Fran Crippen, and Chip Peterson. And that was a year in 2007. We were at Copacabana Beach, and the waves were huge. And it was just important to make sure that we got the athletes down, kind of scoped out, talked about what we were doing, letting them feel pretty comfortable. So anyway, I think it's just important to have a goal in mind as a coach of what are you trying to get out of an open water training session, and then how many athletes you have there. I would say a great rule of thumb is to not go alone and to always have a buddy. But I always would want to have a goal before I would head out to train in a rowing basin or a lake or the ocean. And kind of, I would go into that training session with a plan, like, what am I hoping to get out of this? And I did try to get more people to come, because it's more fun when you get more people. The second thing is just walking around wherever you are planning on swimming and just talking to some people, talk to the lifeguards. Like, any knowledge about the area, I think, is always just really important to have ahead of time. As a coach, I know the athletes are looking to me to be the expert in these things. Another important lesson I learned was that if I got asked a question, and I was uncertain of the answer, it's okay to say, I don't know, but I'll go find out. And it was hard, maybe harder when I was 27 years old. Well, I have to tell these kids I don't know, but it's much better to acknowledge that you don't know and you will find out the answer before giving someone the wrong answer. And prior to going to any swims, I always make sure that I understood what the temperature of the water was and the air, and being able to make sure that that we're going to be safe in how we handle the swim. And a lot of times I would bring our own thermometer, but fortunately in Southern California, Manhattan Beach Pier, and a lot of times they have a whiteboard up that does give you the temperature of the water and the air. I just think it's important to always be aware of that, and it can kind of help gauge for the next swim or the next training swim. And how that relates to nutrition. So making sure that on a warm day there was a cooler, so that we could have the drinks cooled, so when athletes would get out of a swim, and again, that is something that you kind of learn throughout this process of how do you need to be prepared as a coach, and making sure that you're talking to the athletes and understanding how they're feeling post swim. As far as equipment, I love having a group of athletes in a training session that can kind of all stay together. So it's really hard if you head out to an open water training session and you have some kids that are pulling up the rear and then some that want to just take off in the beginning. So I would tell people ahead of time, like, hey, I want to make sure that these kids bring some fins, because that can kind of help close that gap. I rarely use paddles and pull buoy in open water training. I suppose it can be done, but especially cold water, I never felt like a pull buoy was very good. The fins generally ended up being kind of the fun one. And then, if I'm thinking about a course and what type of our training we're going to be doing, I want to know ahead of time, are there buoys? Is there going to be a lot of boat traffic? Are there fishermen coming off of a pier? So we need to be careful about that. Are there a ton of surfers? And just really steering clear and knowing kind of what you're getting into. Another important detail is know where the coaches, if there's more than one, know where you're going to be. I never felt comfortable leaving bags on a beach, or just left alone and then heading out for a swim. I always wanted to make sure that somebody was back on shore with everybody's bags and things. That just is kind of a safety thing. And these last two items, having details of a training set. So I learned over time that it was just important to be knowledgeable about what you were going to ask out of athletes. If I say, okay, this is going to just be an easy, kind of volume day, and then I'm asking them to do something where maybe there's a lot of sprinting, or I'm setting up a course, I always felt like it was important to be detailed in a plan, the same way you would write a practice for a pool. I would always have an idea of a training set that I wanted to do. And one of my favorite places was in Long Beach, around Naples. There's about a row of buoys. It was about 800 meters. I mean, what better way to train than to say, okay, we're going to go 6 800s, and it's going to be along these buoys, and just kind of sharing the detail of the training with the athlete ahead of time, and communicating that what your expectations are. And maybe it's descend 1 to 3, maybe it's descend 4 to 6. And of course, you're going to design the set around, the level of athlete that you have. And again, this can be where if you have two different levels of athletes, And you know, it's very helpful to possibly have two different coaches out on a craft on the water so that you are able to split up or separate if you need to. So all those things are kind of pop in my head when I think about if I'm planning to go to take a group to training session for open water. And I think on the next slide, you'll see. It's going to be a little bit different for race day. So again, race day for me is primarily an international race. And their stress levels are a little bit higher when we're talking about race day. And again, all athletes are a little bit different. I remember in, I think 2009, I just sitting at breakfast, I could tell I was talking to a lot of the athletes, and Andrew Gemmell and Fran and Emily Hansen. And I found myself just talking, and I realized, like, okay, this is my stress. I'm nervous about race day today. So what can I do to check myself and make sure that my nerves are not coming off on the athletes? Because it's my job to keep everything calm and relaxed. The athletes have enough to stress about on race day. So as I'm thinking about the night before a race, maybe these are some of the things that are going through my mind. Again, know the goal of your athlete. I don't want to have a conversation with an athlete about, oh, don't worry, you can be top 10, if really their goal is to win the race, right? I think it's important to make sure that you're on the same page, and knowing the goal of your athletes can help you as a coach prepare that conversation and give them feedback and help their mental game. How many people are in a race? I can tell you that does make a difference. I've seen some races where there's 10 people starting in a 25K versus 70 trying to in a world championship field. And that can change the dynamic of the racing. It can change all the strategies. So, for me, I'm always making sure that I'm counting and know ahead of time how many athletes are in the race so I can prepare our American athletes the best they can. On race day, I always get there early and I talk to other coaches. Like, I am not afraid to make friends with a lot of different people and just talk to coaches and get a sense of, like, is there something they're worried about? Do they feel confident? Do I see somebody overconfident? I'm always talking to the officials, finding out, is the course set? When are you going to put the finish out? So just always getting to a race day early. The last thing you want to do is be stressed. Understanding the temperature of the water and the air, again, that's going to be important. Obviously, if if you're swimming in a really cold race. I remember in Portugal one year, my athlete, I was with Haley, and I did not want to give her warm feeds. I felt like if she's coming through the feeding dock, I knew that she was going to be working hard enough, and it was salt water and it was the ocean and a lot of currents. I just felt like that needed to be room temperature feeds. The other American athlete was told to have, hot tea. And, I don't think that went over well with her. And again, it's important to be prepared with these things and to try what you're going to do prior to a race day. For instance, even hot water in Tokyo, all the athletes and the Olympic race had on cooling vests and things. And you certainly want to prepare your athletes for the right temperature and to have them know how to, what to expect and how their body is going to react when they're put under this level of stress of racing. As a coach, your job is to know the course, and that means knowing the distances between buoys. I would always just go out and try to look at the race course and stand behind the finish line and kind of sight back, making sure that I'm aware that I can share whatever information I see. Where is the sun going to be at, as you're finishing? Maybe it doesn't matter where the sun is at 8 o'clock in the morning, but if you're finishing a race at 10 a.m., it would be important to know, is that going to affect anything as a swimmer is going into the finish? Little details about feeding and where you're going to be. again, whether it's a coach's decision or an athlete's choice, communicating and knowing. There's a great deal of trust that goes on when you're coaching these open water athletes, as you really can't communicate for 2 hours or even 6 hours in a 25K. And so it's really important that you are there for these athletes where you say you're going to be. Again, that goes to what is your athlete going to need? What's information that they're going to want to know? Are they going to want to know, am I 5 seconds ahead? Am I 25 seconds ahead? What place am I in? When you're at the Olympic Games and there's only 25 athletes in the field, you're pretty sure you can identify where different athletes are. And that can be important. If you kind of zone out and all of a sudden you lose track of the field, you might find yourself out of a medal opportunity. And so your brain has to be engaged for the entire 2 hours of these races. For these high level races, all the coaches from the United States, we would always be on radios and on different feeding docks, and making sure that we're communicating. As an athlete went by a feeding dock, we're communicating. I just saw them go through. They're looking maybe a little bit tired. Can you get some more information the next time you see them? I did have one athlete in 2013. She had given me an extra cap and goggles to have in my bag on the feeding dock. As she was coming in, I had someone tell me on the radio, oh, she's lost her goggles. So I was immediately able to go to my bag, put the goggles on my feeding stick, and put that out in the middle of the race. Without being disqualified, she grabbed the new goggles, rolled over, cleaned them out, and took off. But that's something I wouldn't have been ready for if I didn't have the rest of the team behind me, preparing me for something like that to happen. Okay.
Hey, Catherine, would you be interested in taking a few questions, just because we're getting a backlog? But if you want to keep with your flow, by all means do that. But we do have a few questions. So however you feel.
Okay, I'll do the questions.
Okay, we got a question from Shelly, who's still booting up, but she's asking if a parent approaches you and says, my son or daughter is interested in open water. Do you have a criteria to identify talent or to identify talent from pool to open water swimming?
So yes, I think that initially, the important things that I have, I'm not sure if I was going to do that in another talk, but I will definitely.
No. Feel free to table, punt on it. You can cover it later.
There are some characteristics, obviously, that I think you look for in taking a pool swimmer and having them try open water for the first time. I think that you see a lot of different stroke technique and a lot of different types of strokes that you see at the highest level. I'm always a little bit wary if it's a parent coming, because I really think for open water, this is a really hard sport, and it is tough, and it's tough mentally. And so you always want to make sure that athlete really wants to be good at this. I can tell you multiple times there have been people that I want to do open water. This is what I want to get into. And they have one bad race and it's over. They don't ever want to try it again. Well, right there's no mental fortitude. That is not somebody that is going to last in open water. In the United States, we also have time standards for different events. So right away, sort of a time standard eliminates maybe somebody that's going to get dropped by a pack. And again, there are always different types of goals, right? So if it's somebody saying, I want to make it on the national team, that's kind of one thing. If somebody's saying, I want to go do some more open water races and get more experience. I'm actually coaching a girl right now, and she represents a different country. I would say coaching via texting and phone calls, but you know, every time she swims, she'll let me know. And the last time she missed the feeding dock and had to come back to it. And then, you know, she was really upset, but it, you know, it's one of those things, like, that's a learning experience. You have to be able to be resilient. You have to be able to say, like, I messed up, I'm going to do this better next time. And I think really the hardest thing about that question from Shelley is just for where we live. And I feel like there are very few races and very few racing opportunities for athletes to kind of learn that type of thing. So I hope that
that's a great answer. And we're working on that, right, Catherine?
Sure.
More racing opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question here from Melissa, who asks about water temperature. And Melissa, feel free to unmute. Otherwise, I'll just try to summarize it for you. But basically, a lot of athletes focus a lot on water temperature, but in her experience, air temperature is actually just as critical. You know, how do you kind of talk to your swimmers about water temperature? How should they approach it?
Sure. I think that, oh, I'm getting the echo again. Anyway, so water temperature, I think it can be one of those things where if you talk a great deal and you make a big deal out of something, then an athlete is going to respond to that. So if I say, oh my gosh, this water is going to be freezing, you know, I'm really worried about you guys, that's kind of going to elicit a negative response probably. And it's sort of that, you've got to kind of get the toes in, and then if it's cold water, get a little bit deeper, you know, kind of gradually have an athlete get used to something like understanding water temperature. You know, we even had guys on the national team that were competing at World Cups and actually didn't finish a race because they were too cold. And, you know, I always felt like our best open water swimmers are going to learn to adapt to cold water or warm water. And that's just, if it's cold, you got to get used to swimming in a wetsuit. Everybody else is in the exact same situation. And you can't let the temperature become this mental block. I know there was a lot of fear in our Olympians before Tokyo. And in a way, I don't know if it was really helpful. There was a lot of press about how hot the water was going to be. You know, I think that it ended up being a safe race, but I know that we did everything we could to negate that. And so I think by talking to athletes and kind of figuring out, like, okay, what is the fear? What are you afraid of? Like, how can you put like little boundaries out there and then find a little success or a little win? Because that's another thing with open water is I have found you want to find success. You want a kid to have a really successful experience. Maybe it's not the first time, but at least the second or third time. Otherwise, they're going to give up. And you know, we really want this to be it's our job is to help them find ways to be successful. And so it's being creative with some of those things. So
good answer. Great. I think you should just keep going, and I'll let you know if we get a backlog of more questions.
Okay. So I'm kind of trying to complement a little bit about what was in the computer modules, just kind of about the planning and the preparation and what goes through your mind. So I just kind of try to figure out, so preparing for a training swim, again, I kind of talked about the planning that goes in. The thing that I have found, and I've made this mistake before, is I'll get down there with a group of athletes and we're standing on the beach, and then you let one kid go in and then another kid follows, and then they're playing in the waves. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I never even said what we were going to be doing today. And then you've lost everybody. And, you know, it's really hard to pull people back from that. It's like, if you give an inch, they're going to take a mile. So I really always try to have everybody arrive to wherever we were going to be set up. You know, again, open water is different than a pool. So there's probably sand. You're going to have lots of different, a bag. You're going to have sandals. You're going to have, you know, some Vaseline or whatever you're going to do prior to getting in the ocean or in a lake. in a river. It's going to be a little bit different than this pool that we all know is a black line and has parameters. So I would always try to make sure that I got a group of athletes together to arrive early. And so if I really wanted them there at 7:30, I'd probably tell them 7:20. And in my mind, things always take longer than you think they are. So maybe a practice that you want them there at 7:30, they're arriving at 7:20. It just takes time. They're stretching, they're chatting. There's so many things to look at. And again, remaining flexible with plans. That's not just for the athletes, but that would be for me. So if I arrive to a place and I realize like, this is actually, I'm going to have to figure out, maybe there's more boat traffic than I expected, or maybe I don't have the kayak that I thought I was going to have. So, how am I going to be flexible with my plans? And again, that's kind of what I'm getting back to, like, you want to gather everybody, really assess the situation. And as I say, set rules and expectations for, okay, before we get in the water, these people are going to maybe be our leaders. We are going to warm up for about, 15 to 20 minutes, whatever it might be, but kind of setting the objectives or setting the expectations for the swim ahead of time. And it doesn't mean that you have to tell them everything that you're going to be doing, but you don't let one kid that feels good, just take off and go. That's not only is just not safe. My eyes can't be on everybody there. And so, I think it's just important to be prepared for some, different, maybe somebody's shoulder hurts and now they have to wear fins. And there are just always things that seem to come up. Just as is open water, there's just going to be different challenges with weather and people. And so again, have adjustable goals, especially if it's a new athlete or the first time in this swim, right? So maybe your goal is for them to swim for an hour and a half. Maybe after 45 minutes, you're like, okay, wow, we have accomplished everything we need. Like, you can't be afraid to call it at that and say, okay, you can go in, this is okay. I'm happy with where, what you have achieved. Next time we'll try to go a little further, or, putting on sunblock. I mean, I have had some swimmers come out, they don't realize the sun is really strong in some places in the world. And so always having sunblock on, and then Vaseline. We would use lanolin if it was really cold. Just kind of can help with chafing, because there are no walls, they're not stopping, they're going. And again, as I said, prepping for this training swim, it's like, you got to have someone on shore. I always felt more comfortable knowing somebody was on shore. I love this picture from on this slide, actually. I just realized. So this was right before we left for London. And so that in the picture, that was Haley and Ose, both who won medals. And then Chip is sitting on the board. And I think this was in Long Beach. And I told Dave Salo, who was the head coach at USC at the time, I said, well, I'm going to take these guys. They don't need a pool workout today. We're going to go to swim, and, we're going to go swim some open water and just get away from a pool. And then that's Michael Klee and his girlfriend, Emily Bruneman. But so, Michael and Emily were done swimming, retired, but I knew they were in the area. And so I kind of said, hey, can you come join us for this training swim? I wanted it to be fun. I knew we were heading into a stressful environment with the Olympics. I wanted to create this training group where, Chip is the one that won Worlds in 2005 and 2006, and really got me into open water. And then kind of being able to put him with Ose and Haley and some other people that I knew, for me, that was really joyful and fun. And I think it helped everybody get out of their own head. And so, sorry to sidetrack on that. We can go to the next slide. So this is a picture of World Championships. I'm sure Shelly is going to remember this. I think this was in Barcelona. This was a race course where you really couldn't see the entire course from one part of land. So in this picture, you can kind of see that there are all these boats, all these flags, different buoys. There were bridges. It was a really unique course, little bridges all throughout the course. There were some right-hand turns and some left-hand turns, but lots of different things going on. And so I guess this is kind of getting back to what to know when you're showing up to a race. Again, understanding distances. So I needed to know, like, it was a very unique course. So maybe one leg was 800 meters and then a 200 meters and then a turn and then 600 meters. And so all of those things for a pool swimmer, it's important for them to understand what that distance might feel like. And so if I can say, look, this is the distance from this buoy to this buoy, any information I can give like that, that's helpful for them. I think that's really valuable as a coach. That's my job. So kind of understanding the distances. And there's been some courses where it's, 2,500 meters and it's 4 laps. And I can tell you most of the athletes I've worked with find that the most boring course for a 10K. And, I might be like, oh, come on, this is great. And they're like, no, you don't know what it feels like to go this far, this long without looking at anything. And so they're probably right. But understanding currents, understanding temperature, again, like the water temperature. I always love to be able to get the athletes out on the course if they can prior to a race. It doesn't always work out that way. Some races we've shown up and you are not able to get on course, and athletes kind of have to figure out as they are racing with each loop. But I always find that having some familiarity and understanding and being able to visualize has been really, really helpful. And then again, just being aware of like, what color is what buoy, right? Are all the red buoys turn buoys? Are the white buoys intermediate? Does it matter where you go? There's so many different things that's going through your mind when you're swimming in these open water races, right? You have people around you, there's pressure, you've got to think about your feed, you've got to remember what lap you're on, and understanding and taking some of the question out of what color is what buoy and where am I going? We have had athletes disqualified for not going on the right course. And ultimately I feel like, that comes back to the leadership, and I've got to make sure I communicate what the course is and what to expect. And water visibility, again, I don't want to tell an athlete, oh, the water is going to be so clear, it's going to be great, because if it's not, then that's not what they expected. And so again, my answer is kind of like, I don't know. Well, hopefully we'll get there and we'll have a chance to see. And there's this lake in Hungary, and it's, for whatever reason, you can't see your hand under the water, but it's a really beautiful lake, Lake Balaton. But for some reason, it's like this white color. And so we kind of always laugh about the races that are there because you can't see anything, but it's not dirty. It's just, we don't know what it is. Okay, next slide. So as I kind of talked about preparation for an open water swim, just for a training swim, this kind of gets back, I probably covered some of this. Again, when you're going to an open water training session, you want to be there early. You got to get the kids are there early. The same thing for race day, like work backwards from the race time. Are they going to warm up? You do not want to chance anything last minute to be rushing before you're about to race a 10K at Worlds or the Olympic Games. So sometimes I remember there was a race in Doha. We thought that the water temperature was going to be a non-wetsuit race. And we were told it was, all of a sudden the athletes did have to wear a wetsuit, and we were moving the race to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So all of a sudden we had to be really flexible on a race that we expected to start at 8 o'clock in the morning was now 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now you have to take into account, okay, how are we planning out our meals? What are we going to do about warm up? When are we going to get to the pool? All those different things. At the end of the day, remaining flexible is really important. I would always watch the course, try to watch the course being set up, whether it be a nationals or another race, just because I think it would help me learn. you know, again, everything takes longer than you think it's going to take. So putting these transponders on wrists that the athletes have to finish a race usually involves duct tape and scissors and tongue depressors and all these different things. And if you're rushing and you're nervous, things generally don't go well. There's always a suit check. There's a nail check. There's, earrings. Do you have too many piercings? You have to check in the feeding stick as a coach. So all of those things, you just want to make sure that you're not rushed on that. And, again, at a pre-race meeting, you're wanting to ask the questions like, what color are these turn buoys? Are we going to have a lead boat? Are we going to have a media boat? How many safety boats are there? All things that are important to know, because if you're a coach and you're looking out at this race course and, maybe you don't see your swimmer, you need to understand where are the safety boats, what's the communication timeline. It's just important to know what boat is what. If you're an athlete and you're racing and you're thinking, I have this lead boat, are you following the boat or do you take your own course? Just all little things, mistakes that can happen along the way. So it's important to ask those types of questions. And at the start, it was always important for me to let my athletes know who's going to be around me. I would over time understand which athlete is a little bit more physical, who is going to want to take off in the beginning and who am I going to be relaxed. And I'm not going to worry if, this Russian girl is winning at the first 2 kilometer, because she always does that. So I would try to prepare my athletes for that. Next slide. Sorry, I know I'm going kind of fast. This is a great video of a finish and why finishes are so important. This was at the race in Doha in 2020, but if you watch it in real time, wow, that is really close. And if you're picking the top 10 to qualify for the Olympic Games, clearly how you finish does make a difference. I think it'll replay again, but for me, understanding an athlete needs to practice this in a race environment. You can set something up like this in a pool. I mean, you can have some flags. You can let 10 people start, 20 meters out and have them all finish fast and practice reaching for these finish pads. But a lot of times these races after 2 hours or 6 hours will come down to a finish. And it is important to know what the finish chute looks like. It's important to know what side you're most comfortable breathing on. Can you maneuver, the last 5 meters of the race so that working back, are you in a position that's desirable? At the Olympic Games, athletes have been disqualified at this point, at this finish point. And so, imagine having a medal taken away because of something that you did, an infraction. So finishes are also really important to practice. So yeah, it actually looks like the middle is going to do a second, but nope. Okay, next slide. Quinn, and then am I almost out of time? Well, post-race, this is really important. This is what I love about open water is you have to talk about these things with your athletes. That's how I learned the most. That's how I was able to help my athletes, because you have to talk about the things they did well. You have to talk about what they could have done better. Athletes don't always know. I'm just going through and swimming this 2-hour race. I found over time I could start to ask really specific, better questions, and it would make the athletes think more about, oh, well, maybe you're right. Maybe I could have done this. And having a relationship, with your athlete where they're going to trust you. And I can tell you that you'll learn over time. Some athletes do not want to be spoken to right after if it's not necessarily a great finish. I've learned to say the right thing to some people and the wrong thing to others. But, at the end of the day, this is the message where this is where the athlete learns the most that they will about this race. And how else are they going to take anything from it if you don't talk about it? And so I always really enjoyed this. This is the part where different athletes' personalities will come through post race. So I think we're going to skip this slide, and I'll talk about that another time. I'm just going to finish with this, as we talked about planning and preparation for the most part today. This is the ready room in Tokyo. So those are our two females, Ashley and Haley. And as you can see, we're putting lanolin actually, I think that was Vaseline on their armpits and shoulders. They have their transponders on, and you can see all sort of nutrition aids and supplements sitting around. Just some things as I was coming up with, like, I try to think about all the different races that I've gone to, or a training swim. And so what are some of the things that are important to have with you in a bag? For cold water training, I would sometimes bring earplugs or have the athletes bring those. We would also double cap, and a thermometer, as I mentioned, plastic gloves so that that Vaseline or the lube doesn't get on your hands, because that is a hard thing to get off. I would always have an extra cap and goggles. You never know when those are going to split. Water bottles, sunblock, as I mentioned, fins are just a really fun training aid to have. Listerine is more when we're swimming in the ocean and get out of that, just kind of mouthwash always is nice, to a little refreshing when you get out of the water. Some athletes would have like a GPS tracker, a watch that they would use, and that would also kind of help me as well. Binoculars, my phone. I have dropped a couple of those in the ocean. A whistle when you're doing a training session or anything like that with maybe a bigger group of athletes. Sometimes it's hard for the athletes to hear you. So I would always find that a whistle could help get, the athlete's attention, mainly on a training swim. On race days, I would have duct tape because that fixes everything. Tongue depressors that will help put the transponders on, and scissors. So I think that's all I have. If there's any questions, I'm
great. So actually what I'd like to do, Catherine, if you don't mind, is I was going to send out a quick little poll.
Okay.
For everyone to take a quick poll. Okay, so we have more master people, coaches coaching master swimmers between 1 and 10K. And then kind of even split age group at masters. And then who's coaching the ice swimmer? That's what I want to know. The shy one. Oh, that's Elaine. Fantastic. Oh, great. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. Why don't you guys just jump in? We're a small enough group. Don't be shy. Just unmute and chime in. Adele, you had a question earlier about nutrition. You want to ask that? Adele, sorry to butcher your name. I know Suzanne must have a question.
Of course I have a question. Catherine, you asked about, hang on here, let me put Mia here. You asked about, or you put a GPS are acceptable. You do know that there are watches out there that do have pace capability, kind of like a tempo trainer, but also could set for distances.
yes.
Can you speak to that? Yes, no, maybe?
Um,
I'm talking about USA swimmers, because that's the kind of the group that I seem to have fallen into as of late.
Sure. Alex Meyer always had a watch that he would kind of set and be able to tell distances more than anything. And so, you can't compete with that on,
Okay.
but in a training swim, that's where it would be, most valuable. And a lot of athletes, like in coaching, most of the kids I coached, at this level, I didn't get too wrapped up into volumes or yardage, but there are some kids on this national teams that would say, I only hit, 7.5K today. I have to do another, they were very set on what they had to do. And so
well, these watches actually beep. So like, so
Okay.
they actually, it's like a tempo train. Well, it's not really a tempo trainer. They actually beep. So you can set it for like 1,000, in 1,000, I should be going at this pace. I'm telling my kids no watches, but
Yeah.
you say the GPS watches. I mean, the GPS watches have that feature on them. So I'm wondering if I know in marathon swimming, they're in MSF marathon swimming rules, they're not allowed. Marathon Swimming Federation, they're not allowed. Even GPS watches.
That's right.
Because you could just click it.
Yep. And it's just, I think any of those training aids, I think it just depends on the athletes, and it depends on if you have somebody that really thinks they need that, then, but again, for open water, I never worried too much about those specific things. I would much rather see how am I getting, 4 or 5 kids training together. I want them to not be so worried about a specific tempo, but like who can change gears when they need to change gears, those types of things, and understand. Another thing is I'd be like, okay, you're swimming for 10 minutes, how far do you think you've gone? We kind of playing around different, like letting them understand and figure out, oh, have I only been going? Is it really only 10 minutes? Because that feels like 30.
How about for races though? I'm talking about races. Are GPS watches allowed for USA swimming races?
No.
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 That's what I wanted to know.
Yep.
Oh,
We just use it as
Suzanne.
a training aid. Yeah.
Yes, Bob.
They're not legal in US Masters races either.
Well, okay.
They're not legal in US Masters races. That's all I'm telling you.
Okay. All right.
Good. Catherine, what's interesting about the poll is the vast majority of people want to know about improved training plans. So I know you covered some of that here, and we don't want to steal your thunder for later sessions, but I know you have some really interesting things to say about how you lay out a complete season. And I don't know, I wonder if it's just worth touching on that, since that seems to be the overwhelming majority of people want to get that out of this session.
Well, they'll have to wait for the next one.
Oh, okay, perfect. Well, I haven't had the benefit of the sneak preview, so. But the next highest was career development, which is also something, you've had an illustrious career, obviously, but it wasn't preordained that you were going to go into open water. It kind of, you fell into it and found it tremendously rewarding. The travel, all of the benefits and perks, you found it, potentially even more fulfilling than you might have been spending your time on a pool deck. Is that accurate?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's great. And so what would your advice be for coaches, trying to do more, getting more involved with open water?
I think the one thing that I always found was just prepare yourself. If you're the best in this moment, when an opportunity comes your way, you just have to be willing to take advantage of it. Early on, I could have said, I don't know anything about open water. How can I coach anyone in open water? And, I wasn't afraid to ask questions. And I really tried to make the process with an athlete and kind of learning together. And then I always find that by just talking to other coaches, you don't know what other opportunities are out there. And so I try to spread a wide net and really talk to lots of different coaches and understand what they're looking for. And then, over time, your network, you can kind of connect the dots and, help figure out maybe somebody's trying to make the jump from club coaching into college or vice versa. And by knowing more people and just being open and not being afraid to say, like, I don't know. I have all these questions. I'm not sure. I think it's most coaches actually love talking and love talking about their experiences. So try to be a good listener.
That's great. Other questions? Jump in. So one of the questions in the chat, Catherine, was about swimming with currents and without currents, but it made me wonder about, I know a lot of the elite level courses are relatively flat. They can be pretty standardized and rectangular, but what are some experiences you've had with kind of rougher condition courses, and how did your athletes fare, and how do you prepare for that?
I mean, there's a World Cup race every year in Portugal that has huge currents. One leg of the course, it's extremely difficult. You're swimming against this current, and then you are flying on the backside. And that's always a really fun one. I think actually training with a parachute is good, just getting some power training. We also had an endless pool that we would sometimes throw the athletes in, and you can kind of change the pace on that endless pool, and that can kind of wake up a swimmer. And for me, I would always be working backwards from whatever the goal was. So if I knew that the qualifying race was a currents, it was going to be currents, then I would try to find a different race to send an athlete to. So prior to the race in Portugal, that's the race that has major currents and wind and chop. I found a race in Argentina that had a similar setup, and it was in a river. And so, by Haley being able to go to Argentina, have that experience, oh my gosh, like I'm swimming against this current is so hard. But then when I get to ride that wave, it's really fun. And we found for her, she was always really good against the currents. And so she would probably try to make a move within the pack when people kind of get tired mentally, and it's like, oh, and then she can kind of separate herself a little bit more. So that was just a strategy we, worked on and came up with. And the endless pool was really helpful too.
I have a follow-up on the endless pool, because I've heard just anecdotally, and I don't know a lot about it, but I've heard that open water, it simulates open water maybe even better than pool swimming. Can you explain why that would be?
I think you're just in your bubble, and there are some waves, and it does kind of create some sloshing around. And the other thing is you can get going there and there is no wall. And sometimes I would forget about Haley in that endless pool, and she'd just be going. And I was like running practice on the other side of the pool. I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot she's in there.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
She wasn't happy. And actually we would do the endless pool. So we would maybe give some resistance, and then so maybe that would be for about 3 minutes, and then have her get out and then go off the blocks and then do something fast. And so just kind of trying to mix up different environments like that. Always just trying to make it as interesting as I could.
Yep.
I do have a question about, I coach a whole bunch of master swimmers, and not necessarily masters, but most of them are triathletes or want to be triathletes. Some of them are open water swimmers. And in the endless pool, I have had conversations with these guys, because they tend to feel that their stroke and the way they feel the water in a regular pool or even in the open water is different than this hydro pool that we have. And for them, they completely start dropping the hand. They start completely changing the way they move in the water. And what do you do? Like, is that something that happened to all other people? Like, I don't know.
Well, how long are they in the endless pool for?
40 minutes. Like, at some point it was the only way that we could actually have people swimming with the pandemic. So like, there was, because it was a private thing and we could actually get them to swim there. Individually, we'll have like about 40 minutes per person, and we just kind of slot it from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m, and we will have somebody always swimming for 40 minutes there.
Yeah,
but their technique changed.
Yeah, the nice thing about the endless pool is, like, you can take your phone and you can take video on top of the water. We always had a window so you could watch the technique under the water. You can kind of show them that okay, why is your technique failing here? And then I just hate practicing something that's negative over and over again. I always, want to find a way to be efficient. And so I'd rather have 20 really good minutes than 40 bad ones. So.
Yeah, something I did was kind of like stop it and turn it into a very technical session.
Mhm.
Where when I was there, every time it just stop this, then turn it down the current, let's move better and try to figure out how we're going to maintain a good technique even with these conditions. And that's what we did, because I totally agree. It's better to do 20 minutes well, but than 40 minutes of crappy, repetitive things that are wrong.
And a lot of times in a race, you're just not going to feel good. You're going to go through different times when your technique is going to go to shit, and you just have to kind of figure it. You kind of have to make do.
Yeah.
So that stuff, it does happen, but yeah. And I think always just, it's good to vary all the different, like it's fun to be in the endless pool and then mix in pool training and then mix in some open water training. Cause then sometimes I think the kids are so tired of all of our negative feedback. It's nice to just go have a relaxing swim where maybe there is no goal. Maybe it's just enjoy swimming in the ocean for 30 minutes. But I kind of have to go because I have to put my daughter to bed.
Oh, that's great. No, that's important. Yeah, that's your number one coaching responsibility.
But I am
That's
happy
great.
to talk a lot next time.
Great. That's great. Awesome. Well, listen, thank you, everyone. We're going to send around the recording and some information, and otherwise, keep plugging along on the course, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.